So
That is also
from these,
Arship. I'll
you
very
can.
briefly let me share this with you. Let me share this with you. Um, Yamini has been in this field for last 30 years. She has been working on with many galleries, many very well-known, famous galleries. The Bangalore airport is all full of her. What do you say? Her
Curation.
her curation. I wanted to use some better
Okay.
word. Her kartrutva, like
Ah,
she has done the work, and I'm sure even the Delhi Art Gallery. So there are so many things that she has achieved and done, and it is women in fine arts. So first is Yamini Telkar, and then we also have Sharmila here, Sharmila Fadke. These are women in fine arts, and they are going. Yamini today is going to talk to us about women in fine arts, their struggles, how they went ahead with their struggles, how they met up. There are so many artists in not just in India but everywhere in the world. So, Yamini, you are going to talk about the world fine artist, right?
no, I'm just focusing on the India story because there is
Uh,
so much,
okay.
that needs
There are
to be done.
too many of
Too
them.
many.
Yeah.
Though our poster is about, it's
Women
a
in
painting
general,
of
yes.
women in general and becomes something that's very iconic. Also, you know, I chose to focus on the India story because what happens is that you have material on women internationally. But
Huh.
there is no material on women artists in India. I mean, though now the thing is changing, like,
Hmm.
I mentioned that, the biographies and things like that that are coming up, but still
Hmm.
we have a long way to go. And hence I said, let me focus on this. And also, uh, you know, even while deciding what to do, I wanted to add a tagline, but I said it restricts. And sometimes, when you're talking and if I get feedback, it becomes easier. So if loosely kind of, I'm sorry, I've just jumped into the whole topic. Until and unless you had to say something, Mukta, I don't know.
No, no.
Huh?
This is fine. I mean,
It's
this
fine,
is,
right? Yeah.
it's
So,
not like a very, very classroom type
correct.
introduction and lecture.
Yeah, yeah,
Uh, Most of the people who have gathered here are friends, and they are very much interested in the topic. So I think we should just let it
yeah,
start. And
yeah.
Yamini, then I would really like to ask you to
Mm,
prepare a lecture
mm.
on world women artists.
Yeah, yeah,
Hmm?
definitely.
The world story, because there are so many over there, and people
Yeah,
definitely would be interested.
yeah, yeah.
Um, this audience will be definitely interested. Okay.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, there are multiple ways that you could look at it. One is, of course, the whole feminist perspective, saying that the struggles and troubles that the women had,
Mm.
that's one part of it. The other one is, to kind of look at it in the one that I like to kind of talk about is how the success stories and look at it from the perspective of all the aspects which are part of the ecosystem of fine arts, because it's not just enough to have women as the creators, but how does it work as somebody who supporting it? Maybe it's a gallerist, a collector, a writer, a critic. All those roles also, how did that pan out? So, mm, of course, I begin with women who are creators. And I start with this painting. Why this particular painting? It's not one of the most iconic paintings. It's not even in the museum. But this painting was something that broke the price records, in an auction. You cannot ignore the market. It's a painting, of course, like I say, it's by Amrita Shergir. It's called The Storyteller. And it sold for 61.8 crores. Now, that is the highest price, forget for a woman artist, but for any Indian artist that has been paid, till date. Typically, this record, for the past 20 years has been shifting between S.H. Raza, F.N. Souza, or Tayyab Mehta. These are the three, and Gaitondi, of course. These are the four artists where, one year it's with him, the next year it's with him, never a woman artist. And so this becomes, and it's not yet, and it remains unbroken for past 2 years now. So it's something that's phenomenal and interesting. And I begin the story with this saying that for this to happen, while the market is an important player, sometimes it's also a skewed player, because it works on demand and supply, scarcity. So maybe it's not necessarily all art historical and critical, but it is something what people want to acquire, pursue. But to even reach this level, there's a long history that's there. And I'm going to start with late 19th century and, try and bring it up to the current times. And within that, at each section, it's a grouping that I will kind of talk of. The first one is, of course, Mangala Bai Thampurti, one of the oldest artists as a professional studio practicing artist. What do I mean by that? Art is something, it's a flip side. Art is something that is seen as largely when you talk about it with children or at homes, it's what women are supposed to do. It's something that's feminine. But interestingly, when it comes into the professional world, like commissions and painters, which are known, it immediately becomes a man's domain. And that's why I use the term professional painter. Then this is Mangalabai Thampurti, who was Ravi Varma's younger sister. So while Ravi Varma also had his own struggle to, establish himself as an artist, she also was, painting, though she was never allowed to kind of take up commissions, but she always was painting. And, she painted quietly. There are not enough images which are documented of hers. Even now, though there is a Raja Ravi Varma Foundation, you'll find information on Raja Ravi Varma, Raja Varma, but nothing on Mangala Bai. It's very difficult to come by. That's why the quality of image is what it is, because I couldn't find anything. Um, that also is one of the things that you find me constantly saying, that I don't have images, I don't have information. And I think that is something that needs to be addressed and kind of overcome. And that's why I always, whenever I think this is the third time that I'm talking on the subject, and I realize each time I have something new to add to this because I've come across something else or added one more piece of information to it. And it's a long drawn process. And uh, coming back to Mangalabai, Mangalabai's works are seen in a university, but it's again very restricted, not known. Her son and her nephew and grandson, they kind of take up this mantle forward and they continue it. And she was, however, and after her, there weren't any other women painters, which is again very interesting. But she becomes somebody who was great. There's one little anecdote where Raja Ravi Varma actually refers to her compositionally, and she's supposed to be better at understanding compositions and solving compositional problems. So, that says a lot about her skill, her way of thinking. And of course, you will never find this in the movie or in the books. It's only, academia that kind of is now looking at this. The next artist that I talk about is Sunaini Devi. And again, she's associated with very illustrious family, that is the Tagore family. She is the younger sister of Abanendranath Tagore and Gaganendranath Tagore. And while she was in the Tagore household, she was, trained to do art, but not the watercolors or the studio academic style of painting. It was only after she was married and, her husband kind of encouraged her, saying that, why don't you do this? You're very good at it. And then she starts to paint. And interestingly, her works, I personally am fascinated by the style that she paints, because she has something that is so refreshing and different from any of the styles of Abanendranath Tagore or Gaganendranath Tagore, who had both very different styles. But she has her own identity, her own style. And she's painting subjects like Krishna, which you don't find very often, with the Tagore, in the Tagore family itself. And she had her own perspective, saying that this is my world and I paint my world. So Krishna, devotion, mother and child, a woman sitting and just kind of taking the pankha. That is what she does. And her works were then later on kind of displayed in an exhibition. And there, an art critic, an Austrian woman who's a great contributor and art historian for Indian art, Stella Kramrich, she looks at, notices her work and she writes about it. She writes a whole article, and then the works get noticed and she gets exhibited in London, but not so much so in India. And you know, and she was so casual about her work that she would paint on the front, back. If she didn't have enough paper, she would repaint over it. But she was inspirational, but she never took it seriously. That's how it was. In fact, another painter who kind of talks about her and who said that he was inspired by her is Jamini Roy. So uh, it's not as if there was a lack of talent. It's just that there was never the right emphasis that was ever given on for these artists or for these women who were painting. And one would imagine that being in, the Tagore family, which was so forward thinking and, liberal in their thoughts, that an artist like this would have got, limelight and been at the forefront with all the others who were painting. That didn't happen. Very interesting. And that I keep thinking about it, but I never have enough time to kind of go back to it. So it becomes an interest area of interest also. Another person from the Tagore family again, uh, Pratima Devi. Pratima Devi was again, niece of the Tagores. She was widowed at a very young age. When Rabindranath Tagore then said that my son will marry her because, again, liberal thinking against widow marriage, for widow remarriage. So Rabindranath marries his son, his only son, Rathindranath, to Pratima Devi. And he kind of nurtures her talent. They live in Shantiniketan. Again, her inputs are um, it's interesting to know. So the Shantiniketan craft, I'm forgetting the name, they have a craft society. She looked at the batik technique, adapted it for for the Indian weather and the Indian techniques. So she is responsible for that. The leather bags that we, covet in Shantiniketan, she was responsible for designs, for techniques, patterns, and creation of that. She kind of, trained the Shantali women in Katha embroidery so that they can have a source of livelihood. She was also greatly interested in dance, and she was responsible for choreography for a lot of Rabindranath's plays that were staged. More than that, what Rabindranath noticed was that her talent for painting. And when Shantiniketan was set up, they didn't have somebody who could teach them fresco, that's the Italian wet on wet plaster. So she was sent to Paris, and she's one of the first artists from the Bengal or the Shantiniketan to go to Paris and study and come back. Unfortunately, I don't have dates, otherwise I would have loved to say, the dates and make a comparison. But she goes, and then when she comes back, then she works with Nandalal Bose in creating the murals, which we see till date in Shantiniketan. So look at the kind of contribution which is there. And the only image that I have associated with her work is this portrait that she did of Rabindranath Tagore. It is unfortunate, but that is the state of thing. I'm sure it's there somewhere, but somebody needs to kind of make the effort, dig it up, and kind of, do all this work. So again, a very interesting artist. Though there is a text that is written about her works, in brief snippets here and there, but there isn't any image that you can talk about. What you would have noticed is so far, what I've been talking about is women who are associated with artist families or, come from that lineage. And another one that I would bring up again, somebody who's not spoken about enough, I feel, is an artist called Angela Trinidad. Her father, A.X. Trinidad, was a painter. They were from Goa, studied at JJ. She studied at JJ. And she was, very interesting works at it. So, of course, what you see in the background is the studio practice of, genre scenes that were there. But she does something very interesting. So, that's one of her early works as a student life study. Why am I showing this? Because there was a hesitation. I would just say the word hesitation in allowing women into live painting, studio class, male study, nude studies. But she was, of course, her father was a trailblazer, a blazer, and she also kind of gets an opportunity to be there. There's another artist, I didn't put that in because it gets too long, Ambika Dhurandhar, M.V. Dhurandar's daughter, who was also a student at JJ School of Art. and the kind of work that they did and how they took up commission work. But what is interesting for Angela Trinidad is that, look at the image on the left over here, where she and she's not the only one to do it. There were others also who were looking at it, where she reimagines Mary and the figure of Christ in an Indian context. And she creates these beautiful pictures of them in saris because that becomes more relatable than showing Mary in like that white robe or very European kind of clothes. So that was a phase where she was so intensely involved in that. And these are all paperworks that she did. And then towards the end of the life, as it happens with most artists, as the more exposure you get, she gets inspired by Cubism. But her cubism comes from a very philosophical perspective, and from that particular aspect, and she calls it Trinidadism. So this is a first instance, or the earliest instance, where a woman forms a group and identifies it as something. And she says that they're all three triangles. So she equates it to the Trinity uh, concept, and she looks at both. She looks at Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and also the trinity of the Father and the Holy Spirit, and the ghost that kind of comes in, and she creates painting with the Indian subject matter. The thought is very interesting, and how she works on it, and how she kind of puts out these stories to write about it. And she was a very well-traveled woman, because through the missionaries, she would, put her works up in exhibitions, and she traveled. She traveled extensively, not so much in Europe, but a lot in North America with her works and, paintings. And she was recognized for that. In India, not so much. Again, the Americans kind of took note of her work in that missionary circuit. And there's some evidence that is there today of what kind of work that she did. Now I come to the most mysterious person. I'm fascinated by this artist, Damayanti Chawla. There's no record of her, apart from saying that, in one book, publication from 1950 or 60, where she won an award, 50s, where she won an award from the All India Fine Arts and Culture Society in Delhi. And that's it. And I was just fascinated. This is a personal, mystery that I'm trying to solve. I saw her works in Chandigarh Museum, and of course, they don't allow you to photograph. And I've been trying to get photographs of her work for the longest time. So, if any of you have any contact in Chandigarh Museum, I would just love to see the photographs of her work. Uh, but I do have something. It's not like I'm just going to put a name. I don't have a picture of her as to how she looked. Why is her story interesting to me? Because she was in Lahore. She gets married to an IS officer. She moves to Delhi. She has children. And then, unfortunately, her husband passes away very early. And then she has to kind of fend for herself. She uses art, and she does, again, I don't know whether this is her work. There's a mention somewhere that she was given the award to make, the mural on one of the postal buildings. I imagine it is this. I tried finding out. Again, I couldn't find much information. Now, when I went to Delhi, the whole building is whitewashed and there's no trace of it. So thankfully, there's this bit of an image which exists, and we imagine this is Damayanti Chawla's work. So why is it interesting? So of course, she goes and does this. To do something at this scale in a public building is not easy. The logistics of it, the understanding, the scale, these are all hugely challenging projects. But of course, she has done this successfully. Then she went to study in London, mural painting. Her children were young. She leaves them behind. She goes, she studies, and she comes back again and establishes a studio in Delhi. And yet, for somebody who's done so much of work, there's no mention. And it's not like she's in this, we're talking about around independence. And yet, there's a lack of documentation, or, looking at work seriously, that one encounters. And I hope that, you know, there's some interest that kind of picks up. These are some of her early works that I was able to get hold of. But beyond this, there's nothing. So mysteries and mysteries. So rather than giving you more information, I'm kind of saying, oh, I don't have this, but it's a mystery. That's what it is. And I think I've particularly chosen to look at these artists to highlight the fact that it's not only enough that the women are talented, or forget women, the artist is talented. It's important to have the right kind of support, and it's important to have it documented to be able to continue down in history and know what the contributions were. Um, now I come to some artists. Now, from here onwards, we'll have better records, images, and information that's available because we're kind of coming into slowly into a time. So she would have been active around the independence and post-independence. Uh, Another important artist, Meera Mukherjee. Um, she studied in Shantiniketan, the Government College of Arts and Craft. She studied painting. And then she gets a scholarship. She goes to Germany. While she's over there, she is exposed to the world of sculpture. And after a year of studying painting, she decides to change her specialization and starts doing sculpture. Now, being a sculptor, even in today's day and age, is a challenge. Um, I'll tell you why is it a challenge. It's a challenge because um, paintings also require space, but to make a sculpture, you need larger space. It's very material driven. You need to have volume of space around you. And the kind of investment that goes is a little bit more in comparison to what a painter would have to kind of put. Of course, these are relative things. It's difficult to kind of manage that. And people don't buy sculpture that easily for multiple reasons. I don't know what they are, but uh, you know, being a sculptor is challenging, period. And I think Sharmila would also kind of agree with me when I say make that statement. And despite that, she managed, to do something that is very phenomenal. Not only that, once she comes back to India, what she does is, she looks at the traditional form. She goes to Bastar, which is now, in Chhattisgarh, and she looks at their traditional way of making sculpture, which is dokra casting. Uh, and Dokra casting, typically, you will encounter them when you go to any of the crafts bazaar or craft mela. You see them as little things, little animals to keep on tables or keychains or some small objects that are made. Why is that so? One is the material is such because you have to kind of make these long noodle-like things or wax, coil them up, make the object, make a mold. Then you have to heat it, then the wax melts away. Then you pour it in the metal. This is how it was. It's a lost wax process, basically. And she took that up and she said that it is so beautiful. It's something that's so Indian. Uh, and it was something that resonated. But then she started working with, she learned it. So look at this. She's come back from Germany where she's trained in, modern sculpture technique and art forms. But she chooses to go to Bastar, learns from them, and lives there and makes some of the most amazing sculptures that we have in Indian art today. What is flashing up on the screen right now is a sculpture which is in Delhi. It is in ITC Maurya. It is in their garden space. This is Ashoka. Kanishka, sorry, not Ashoka, Kanishka. And it is made using Dokra casting, and it is about 12 to 13 feet. It's a mind-blowing sculpture. So anytime you happen to be in Delhi, please make it a point to go and see something, because this is really, really iconic sculpture. Um, then she, of course, did a lot of smaller works. I think this Nataraj is beautiful. The way she captures the whole movement, the circularity, three-dimensional, it's just beautiful. What you see on the right is, fishermen casting net. Now, can you imagine that as a sculptural form? Just to imagine the whole thing. And what we have probably today of Meera Mukherjee is possibly, about 50% of her work. Why? Why am I saying that? Because she had no funds. So what she would do is once she finished making a work, she enjoyed it, a new idea, a new inspiration comes up. She melts the metal from that sculpture and makes another one. That was the situation that she lived in. And that's what she had to do. So we possibly lost so many works of hers. But there are two books which are available on Meera Mukherjee. One that was published about 10 years ago, and there's one recent publication also that's come in about her work. There's another aspect of her work. While we see her doing sculpture, all of this work, she was again somebody who was a great believer of crafts. And she did a lot of Katha embroidery. For those of you who are in Bangalore, or if you happen to go to Bangalore, you should go to the Museum of Art and Photography, that's MAP. There's one piece, okay, one piece that I saw of her Katha embroidery, which was just again very beautiful. Um, why I bring that example up is because in one of the artists later on, I will again refer to this. uh, you know, I'm not going to get into it because I don't think we have the time or the bandwidth to deal with that aspect right now, but just something to kind of, uh, you know, sound you guys off with. Is there this whole concept of feminine materials, feminine forms, um, versus more masculine kind of way of working? And embroidery was always seen as that, and metal sculpture is always seen as something that's more masculine and strong. Okay, just leave it. We won't get into a discussion on that because it it needs a whole, not one session but multiple sessions to kind of talk about it, unravel it, find out where it's coming from and what it means actually. But this is a trend or a broad-based thing that is usually looked upon when you talk about craft like embroidery and when you talk about sculpture, especially metal sculpture that you encounter. Another interesting artist. By the way, I'm skipping a whole lot of artists, in between because otherwise this would not just be one lecture but multiple. And I've really kind of tried to pick up trail, artists who made difference or who chose to do something very radical. And that's how I'm looking at all these artists. The next one that I want to talk about is Pilu Poch Khanwala. So the road in Bombay, Pilu Poch Khanwala Road, there is a Poch Khanwala Road, Sir Poch Khanwala Road, and a Pilu Poch Khanwala Road. So that's the Pilu Poch Khanwala that we're talking about. Again, she was not formally trained in art. She had her Eureka moment when she was in Paris. She was in advertising. Always in the world of art, but in advertising specifically. And while she was traveling in Paris, she was in the Louvre, she saw some works and she was inspired. She comes back. And when she's in her 30s, she trains under N.R. Sardesai, I think, if I've got the name correct. And she begins to make sculptures. So of course, she begins with working in wood and marble and stone. But again, in her 40s, she changes her medium and she does something that is quite unique for that particular period. I'm talking about the late, uh, it would be about 70s, where you use scrap metal and scrap metal to make sculpture. And that was something quite modern and challenging because sculpture was usually seen as something that you work with stone where you carve or you add. But to make something like this of scrap was like, oh my God, what is this? And those of you from Bombay and older might remember the Haji Ali Circle used to have this peacock. It was about 12 to 15 feet, uh, and it was made of scrap metal. In fact, Bombay has three of her sculptures in public spaces. The peacock was one, but in the 90s, the peacock was demolished, sold back as scrap, and there's no record of it. The second sculpture, which is now recently lost, was in front of the CSMVS and that circle, right opposite in the traffic island, right opposite the museum, which was a maquette of the peacock. But that traffic island was removed to incorporate the new sculpture that's come there. And this sculpture is again lost. Artists are making noise about it, but nobody knows where it is. There's a third sculpture of hers in the city, which is in the Nehru Planetarium, right opposite the Nehru Planetarium. Again, in a way, you have that sloping thing, which is called the Eye of the Moon. It's a beautiful sculpture. So next time you happen to be there, do take a look at it. The point that I'm making is that she was a sculptor who worked with scale, who defied convention, and did a lot of work for the city publicly. These are some of her other works in metal where, again, it's a scrap metal and how she works. And to do something like this at a time when, sculpture was not in the forefront, this was a new material, was again something quite phenomenal. Now, from the creators, I want to, talk about three other women who made important contribution in the institutions that came into the country or that were formed for the country for not only fine arts per se, but um, when I say fine arts, again, it's a pitfall of mine. I talk about painting and sculpture, but the larger ecosystem. Start with Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay. She comes from Mangalore, a Gandhian, there are many firsts that are there. Sorry, I'm just going to take a sip of water. She was the first woman to I think she was the first woman to take active participation in the freedom movement for the Dandi March. For the Salt Satyagraha, she was close to Gandhi because her family was always, aligned with the freedom fighters. And she kind of said that women should be included in the Satyagraha. She was the first one to contest elections from the Madras constituency. Um, she was she was initially interested in theater, so she's formed the theater group. And she was also, I'll just go on to the slide. She was also sorry, just put on the line. She was also responsible for setting the Sangeet Natak Academy, the National School of Drama, the Central Cottage Emporium, then the revival of, of course, everybody might recognize this as, Pochampalli, which is from Andhra, that's tie and dye. This is double cuts that you see over here. Why was she getting involved in all of these things? Because of her, ideology and her association with Gandhi and activism. She understood that craft and art need to be used as not only means of aesthetic or simple pleasure, but they can be used to kind of, be a source of income for people in the rural areas who do not have access to industry. And while at one hand, industrialization was required, you could not lose out on your traditional crafts. She's responsible for many things in the textiles sector. So originally, Pochampalli was a rumal or a piece of cloth that was used by the fisher folk or men or farmers to tie around their waist. And that was the size that it was made in. That's it. And, simple basic black and white and red that was used. She encouraged the weavers to say that take it forward, make saris, and I'll make sure that you find a market for it. And she kind of encouraged them and set up the entire economic channels and ways for them to do. The second thing that she was very responsible for was revival of kalamkari. Today, of course, in the name of kalamkari, you see a whole lot of things that are going out there. I'm not going to comment on that. But just to show you what do I mean by that. The piece that you see on the right over here, that's how the delicacy of the technique was. Kalamkari, like literally a pen dipped in ink, and then you're making a drawing. It has about 22 steps before you get to this final result. And there was only one person who was there practicing this craft because everybody had lost, one, the patronage had dried up. There was no export market that was available, and they didn't know what to do. The easiest way for them was to take up jobs in the new industries that were coming out or move to the city as migrant labor. Again, it is her intervention, and she says, why don't you train younger people. I will get you the market, and I will get you the mm, economic benefits that come from this. And she's responsible for the revival of that. And today you go to Kalahasti and you have, I mean, the entire village is involved in, making kalamkari of various quality, range, style, everything that is there. But again, if it had not been for her and her timely intervention, we might have just lost this entire, craft. And the other thing that she was again responsible for was the revival of glazeware in Jaipur and specifically, of course, also in other regions. But today we know it as the blue pottery of Jaipur. Again, she said, earlier they were done largely for architectural use. She kind of makes them do more utilitarian wear and, things that could be easily accessible by people. That's the contribution that you have of Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay. Of course, I mean, I'm just kind of giving you the very broad picture, but she was also responsible for supporting the performing arts, um, especially what you have as the Yakshagana, then the Bhuta practices, which is from coastal Karnataka, from the Mangalore, more Mangalore than would be where they're used for, during the ritual practices that happen, Bhuta Kola, and she kind of, made sure that they were the better examples were put in museums and documentation. She wrote extensively about it. She formed a lot of these ministry departments in the ministry to support exports and support the entire uh, revival, sustenance, and she worked at the grassroots levels. Now, in contrast to Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, you have another person, Upul Jaikar. Pupul Jaikar is responsible for. I picked up this photo because, again, there are not many photos of her. One, she's very close to J. Krishnamurti and Indira Gandhi both. Her background is completely different from Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay. While Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay is on the grassroots level, comes from is more comes from a political activist background. Nupur Jaikar comes from the urban environment, and she looks at art as a way of being um, the poster child for Indian culture, Indian heritage internationally. And she's done a lot of, I mean, not that she didn't do work within the country, but she was I don't know how many of you have been to the Crafts Museum in Delhi, but that's again a phenomenal place. She set it up, in Delhi. She set up the IGNCA, that is the Indira Gandhi National Center for Art and Culture, again in Delhi. She set up the National Institute of Fashion Technology. She set up the export division of the handicrafts and handloom. And she was responsible for, doing these things which are known as the festivals of India. Of course, we don't have them now as much, but in the 80s until the mid 90s, there used to be this great trend of taking Indian uh, traditional forms, performing a visual, craft-based, and kind of doing a show internationally. So this particular one was in the Smithsonian. It was 1982, which is there. So the lady in the black and yellow, that's Pupul Jaikar. That is, of course, Rajiv Sethi, another important cultural figure. And of course, I need not say Rajiv Gandhi and Nancy Reagan. So these are the kind of setups that they would have for the festivals. And there were a, quite a few of these festivals that happened in London. Then there was one in Germany. And there was another one that happened in Paris. Not all were hers, but she was the first one to kind of do this, to take the message of the heritage and the culture of India as something that is so rich and vibrant. She was also responsible, and she's quite a maverick. She was also responsible for, bringing in Ray and Charles Eames, the people who founded phenomenal designer thinkers who set up NID in India. She brought in Pierre Cardin into the country and said, why don't you come into our country and see the rich textiles we have? And started the trend of all the international designers kind of coming to look at craft techniques that they could incorporate and get made from India. Apart from that, she also worked with the Museum of Modern Art in New York. And she curated one of the earlier exhibitions. It was in 1956, which was on textiles and ornaments of from India. So again, doing these lavish, luscious displays of textiles and jewelry and ornaments, but in a very engaging academic way, to talk about the vibrancy of the culture, because India had a very bad image back then, saying that it's a country that's developing, underdeveloped, and this was an effort to kind of say that, hey, look at the wealth that we have in terms of creativity, in terms of aesthetics, and she was quite the person to kind of do this. Before I move on to Jaya Appaswamy, um, the time period that Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay and Phul Jayakar kind of worked is almost simultaneous. I mean, Kamala Devi was senior by about 12 years. Uh, they were never close friends. This is again something that I want to bring up because it always fascinates me. But they worked parallelly. While one worked, you know, at the rural Indian level, the other one was kind of operating in the international level. They acknowledged each other, but it was almost like they agreed to disagree. They were never friends. And, you know, it's it's interesting to note how you have two very strong women doing work for the sector in their own ways and kind of creating a legacy that even till date people have not been able to match up. Of course, you have Rajiv Sethi, you have other people like Mayank Singh Kaul, younger ones who are doing it, but nothing can touch the kind of work that they have done. They have inspired the newer generations to kind of, take up and work on. Uh, so we have 45 minutes, and I still have a few more slides to go through because I want to have conversations with all of you over here. So the third person that I'm talking about, again, who's responsible in terms of, I mean, she trained as an artist, again, studied at Shantiniketan, but she moved on to writing. And she was the one who was when she was the editor of the magazine Lalit Kala Contemporary, she changed the way people wrote about art. So there's even today you can see this trend. There's one who will write based on the press release saying, "Oh, very beautiful paintings, lovely handling of brushwork, everything is good, 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 good," right? You don't get a sense of an analysis of what is happening in the work, and that's what it is. But Jaya Appaswamy kind of brought in this perspective of saying that how do you put it in context? So if a painting was done, she says, oh, she would say, oh, 1956, she would contextualize it with the social political situation. She would contextualize it in the artist's trajectory of work which was there in a very simple and accessible manner. And what she introduced was that Lalit Kala would make these monographs on artists. So like on Hussain, Birende, Shankhu Chaudhary, in a very easy, digestible, like little pocket books was there. So that is something that was very interesting. It's not that they were not writers. You had writers who were writing on art, and two people that I can name is one is Pablo Bartholomew, who was in Delhi and who was writing about the same thing that she was, but he was writing it in a very academic, theoretical manner. And the other person who was writing on art was Swaminathan, J. Swaminathan, who was also an artist, but he was deeply rooted in politics and the left particular. And, his perspective came from there. So Jaya Appaswamy kind of brought in a voice that was, something that we look to writing in that particular kind of style. Hers was an earlier way, or the first ones to look at it in a very objective, critical manner without either going into too decorative, descriptive words or being too theoretical about it. That's her contribution. And her other contribution was that she was the first one to study Tanjore paintings in terms of historicity, in terms of how they were made, what is it, why you should look at it seriously. Otherwise, nobody paid attention to it. So that's it. And for the longest time, I think up until 10 years ago, this was the only book that you had to look at it in a historical kind of perspective. And of course, she also looked at glass paintings. The reverse paintings that you have largely from Gujarat. And people who know, oh, this is European influence. She was the one who, kind of traced the history, saying that it's not from Europe, but it's coming in from China, and it has got a Chinese kind of connection between what is happening in Gujarat and in China for glass painting. So, innovator, thinker, and of course, a painter. Uh, but she stopped painting in, you know, not as active and as a prolific a painter, but again, a very interesting style of painting. And again, her paintings are there in Chandigarh Museum, a couple of them in the National Gallery of Modern Art, but not much is there. And her archive, her writings, and her work is made into a foundation which is called as the Rasaja Foundation, which is in Delhi, and it's a great resource. I also now want to shift gears, and I know I'm changing gears very quickly, but that's the fun of it. Uh, I'm going to look at Madhubani, uh, particularly three artists only. I'm not looking at any other folk art practice. One, practically, it's not possible, and it is a very interesting story which exists also. So, uh, you know, in Bandhubani, just to give you the first time that it was kind of brought into limelight was when William Archer was surveying the area after an earthquake. This is from Bihar, and this was in place of the village of or the town of Mithila, and he sees a broken house and he finds these beautiful painted walls. He gets fascinated. He does a survey, and he calls it the Mithila paintings. Then it takes and it gets written about in Mark magazine, and then everybody kind of notices it. Pupul Jaikar reads about it. Pupul Jaikar then goes to Mithila, and then starts bringing these works out into the public domain. How does she do that? She gets them to work on paper. And the reason why she does it, because there's another earthquake that happens. This is in 66 or 67, not too, in the 60s. Um, and, the option that the government gives the people there is that they do hard labor. They can get employed as laborers for building roads. Pupul Jaikar felt that it was unfair to ask women to kind of take up that role and be paid for it. She says, what is the alternate that I can do for them? She recalls this article that she had read. She goes there, tells the women to paint on paper. The women resist earlier because traditionally these paintings were made on the ceremonial wedding room of the bride and the groom, and they had symbolic meanings. It was about fertility, the woman getting pregnant, seeking the blessings of the goddess, and it was a communal activity. So the oldest lady of the house would start the painting, the younger ones kind of helped it. And again, depending on which caste you belong to, the painting style would change a little bit. So the Brahmin women would have something else, the Kayas had something else, and in that the subcaste had something else. The Kayas would also paint on the walls, but the Brahmin would only have it inside, and so on and so forth. But that becomes something, it's purely a domain of women painters. But again, to give them a source of livelihood, to give and to retain their dignity, and to allow them to have something that they can continue to do beyond that particular moment, she encourages them to take it to paper. And some of the most important of fantastic works that you ever see is by these three artists. Sita Devi, that's her work. I had the privilege of kind of looking at this work. It was in somebody's collection and they wanted to sell it. Just stunning work. Um, is Mahasundari Devi. Uh, uh, and the language is from Sita Devi to Mahasundari Devi has also kind of changed, because it's going on paper. Then you have Ganga Devi. Sad story of Ganga Devi is that she had done a mural for the Crafts Museum in one of the rooms. When the Crafts Museum went under renovation, which is about 10 years ago, they whitewashed her work and we've lost it forever. And that's the sad, sad part. Sometimes, even in a place like Crafts Museum, which is supposed to be the custodian of the heritage, you have these kind of acts that happen. So that's why I particularly always put this picture to talk about that story and say that how, I mean, it's not related to the topic, but at the same time, it is. Um, Today, of course, Madhubani is no longer um, contained with the subject matter, which was, she's actually painting a Kubar, uh, but they're doing many other subjects. They're looking at contemporary subjects. Men have started doing it. Artists, how should I say, um, non-traditional subjects, painters, materials are kind of coming in, and it's become a domain for everybody. And you go into, again, you go to Delhi Heart or you go to any of the crafts bazaar, you will find Madhubani paintings in all shapes and all forms. But this is, these are some of the star practitioners. And they've all been awarded with Padma Shri, Padma Vibhushan, taken internationally. Some of the best works are seen in Japan because, the Japanese have collected it with great frenzy. The best documentations that you've had is from France. There are people who come regularly, document it, work with them, multiple stories, a lot of research that has been done on this particular subject. Now I come to the last leg of my presentation, and I begin with this image. The lady that you see is Kiran Nadar. She's one of the first private museum that was set up was by her. It is called the Kiran Nadar Museum of Art, or that's KNMA, that's in Delhi again. And she is a flamboyant collector. So she wants to have, she began by collecting only contemporary art. So that is people who are working right now. And some of the best examples can be seen with her. So what is in the backdrop is a painting by Bharti Kher. I will talk about it as we move along. Why is she important? Um, she's important because that's a snapshot of her museum. She Because again, she made it cool, or she made it like very appealing to be a collector. Earlier, there was this trend, not trend, earlier, collectors used to be very receipted. You rarely saw them outside of the art circles or splashed around in media. Their collections were very private. You didn't know what they collected or what existed where. So that was a problem. But with her, even before her museum kind of came into front, everybody knew what she had, what was happening. This marks a change in the uh, attitude towards art. It marks a change of consumption of art. And it is at par with what is happening internationally. Because internationally, collectors would always talk about their paintings and, kind of showcase it and have collections. And this kind of shifted the perspective. Of course, now you don't have still as many museums or private collections that are available for display. Of course, there's Museum of Art and Photography in Bangalore, which is one person's effort collection that you see in the space, or unfortunately you have it only as in a form of book, which is Jagdish Mittal's collection, not as a physical space, or what you have in Bombay now, which is housed in the CSMVS, is the Jahangir Nicholson art collection. So there are a few examples. So she becomes your kind of aspirational, thing for collectors. And very interesting stories also. Like she's single-handedly responsible for creating two, if not more, records for the most expensive paintings, that have been brought. I particularly brought this painting in because we're women in fine art and we're talking about women. We've left the men out. This is how Raja Ravi Verma looked at the woman. Another long discussion on this, but just as a slight fun element, I've included this particular painting in here to move on or segue into somebody completely different. I come to Mrinalini Mukherjee. Remember earlier while I was talking about Meera Mukherjee, there's no connection between Mrinalini and Meera Mukherjee. Uh, I said that I will talk about this thing of the feminine art form. For me, and for I think a large number of us, when you look at a work of art, it doesn't matter who the painter is. It's the because the aesthetics or the inherent qualities of a work of art are sacrosanct. They don't change because a 20-year-old makes it, or a 50-year-old makes it, or an Indian makes it, or a Japanese makes it. Yeah. What defines a work of art as good is inherently same. Of course, there will be cultural differences, but a good work of art is something that everybody understands. So to kind of then go and say a man has made it, a woman has made it, and a feminine thing is problematic. And I know where it comes from, but it is not. It can't be used to kind of say that, oh, that's kind of be disrespectful or kind of negate it. Mrinalini Mukherjee, it's just a little bit about her lineage. She is the daughter of Binod Bihari Mukherjee, phenomenal artist, Shantiniketan, Madras, and did a whole lot of work. Her mother was Leela Mukherjee, a sculptor who we don't know much about. And she studies painting, again, starts off with painting and then moves on to sculpture. And she chose a material which was had two strong associations. Craft, again, the way I deliberately kind of said it as that, because craft is again something that's seen as a hobby and not serious. Children, women kind of taking it up. And as a feminine material, because it is soft and it is used for making bags and macrame and things like that. But Mrinalini Mukherjee chooses a material that is, and this is in the 70s, chooses a material that is kind of laden with all these histories and weight and baggage that it comes with, and makes the most amazing sculptures. They're large. These are she call and they have names. So this one I think is Vanashri, which was you know these are all spirits and beings of the forest. That's one of her dominant subjects that you see. And she does another thing with it, which was kind of, highly contested when she started doing it. She doesn't leave the material in its natural, fiber color, but she dyes it and she uses artificial dyes for it. And she says, this is a choice that I have. If I want my sculptures to look a particular way, I will do it. I'm not going to stick to the natural thing because that's how macrame traditionally is. But this is a material that is mine and I will make it the way I want it. And that's how she did it. Longest time was, not taken seriously, not seen as much in what you call the museum circuit. But gradually things changed, and Kiran Nadar has possibly the best collection of her works. Then she's taken her works into, of course, the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It's shown in the Venice Biennale, international collections, and so on and so forth. It's an amazing, amazing work and pioneer in the kind of, the way she treats them. If you stand in front of these sculptures, there is an aura and a power that they have, and you just kind of are moved by it. Um, and the last three artists that I'm talking about, Nalini Malani, very important, uh, because what she did was, this will explain it. I think in one of my earlier lectures, I'd ended with this slide. Nalini Malani kind of moves or breaks this whole thing, the binaries that we have painting or sculpture. She does video, she does performance, she does projections. She uses material like, this is Mylar. Mylar is the acrylic sheets, paints on them. So she kind of moves away from the whole traditional way of making art into a very thinker's new, experimental, bold way of doing it. And interestingly, very rarely do you see her exhibiting her works in India. Uh, she always is in Europe, museum, particularly showcasing her work. She's won many awards. She's won the John Miro Award in 2023. She won the Fukuoka Museum, which is a Japanese Museum Award. She won the Kyoto Museum Prize. She won some French. So it's like illustrious names of what is. So she's an internationally acclaimed, recognized artist from India who's doing great work. The next one that I want to talk about is somebody younger, Shilpa Gupta, trained at JJ School of Art. And again, you know, I just wanted to put everything in one slide. That's why I only have got three different styles of her work. But she does sculpture, she does painting, she does these, light-based work. Like, what is the work over here? This text today will end is her work, where she talks about the societal pressure through words, and that's her work, which was done in Europe. This particular work is called The Voices That Couldn't Speak. So there's a microphone, there's audio visual that's happening. People have to sit down and listen to. And one of the most interesting work that I find is that, previously, before you had this digital signage, remember at airports you had like those dropping things where the flight number would come and then it would kind of move. She uses that to share these cryptic messages. Still, they know your dreams and things like that. And again, show is being shown internationally. Has works awards. She was the Game Changer Award by the Asia Society. Constantly doing mega shows internationally. I want to end the presentation with an artist, Bharti Kher. Uh, she Again, the choice of material is very interesting that she uses. She used bindis, the sticker bindis that you have to make her work. The one that was there in the backdrop of Kiran Nadar, she uses hordes of them. And her studio is like a big factory in Gurgaon. And she's got the women from her studio, women from Gurgaon. She employs them and they work, they make her work. It's like a production that is there. Her bindis go from like little sizes to like mega sizes that you see over here. And that's her work. It's a statement that she's making on how the bindi becomes a sign, a mark of a woman. She's got a whole lot of story around it, but she uses it as a tool for her work of art. And she also does sculpture. As you can see, it's a gigantic sculpture. It's almost 15 feet. It's in bronze. It's cast in bronze. And it's got these beautiful colors that are there. And this was commissioned by the Municipal Corporation of New York. And this was commissioned and completed and installed last year. It's in Central Park. So where we began was with Amrita Shergill saying that it sold for that much price, and the artist that we said, oh, we don't have enough record, enough information. And now, till date, a journey that has been about over 100 years, and the way the artists are uh, positioned, the way the artists are working. Also, if you notice their photographs, the way they stand, very confident, you know, almost like confrontational, to where I had no photographs. It's been, I think, the artists are very conscious, confident of the work that they do, where they want to be seen, and how they're positioning themselves. There are many, many more artists which are there, but I have picked up these to kind of talk about a story that I'm kind of building over here. With this, I kind of end my presentation. And if there are questions, thoughts, comments, I think we have about 20 minutes, which is good enough. At least I think it's good enough.
Oh my God. Thank you so much, Yamini. I'm zapped totally. Many things we didn't know about this.
Yeah,
Feel sad.
yeah,
You feel sad, especially for the older artists. It was so difficult for them
absolutely.
out of the social norms and expectations and still do what they love to do.
Yeah, yeah. And there's a whole section that I've not kind of touched upon, and
I know this is not enough. This is not. Demand more, please, Yamini.
Yeah, yeah. You know, there's a whole section of the 70s which would have taken us into a different trajectory. I said, okay, let me not do that.
No, 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 let's do that. Let's do that. Not now, but
Yeah,
let's
yeah, yeah.
do a
No,
whole
no,
series. I'm sure at least 15 people will sign up to listen to you.
yeah, I think we should do that because that's such an interesting story. These are wives of the painters. And I hate to say wives of the painters. They're artists. Today you recognize
Yeah, yeah,
them
you should
that,
not say that.
but that's how I could like kind of bring the problem out, saying them what happened to them or why they didn't do what they wanted to do and what took them so long. So that's another interesting story.
I'm reminded of my friend Kavita Mahajan, who was a Marathi, very famous writer. She's no more. She
Mm,
used to paint. She
mm,
created one story and she painted for it. And those paintings were so beautiful. And well, maybe because of the mm, background or the foreground of Marathi writers and literature, that did not get as much publicity. Okay, publicity is different,
mm.
but exposure.
Also, I think what happens is, I mean, this is a problem that I constantly kind of think about and face, is that if you're within a literary circle,
Mm,
there's very few interactions between the visual. They will meet, but very rarely. But there's no enough of, kind of, how should I say, exchange of ideas and things
change.
that are happening
True.
between even dance for that matter. You had a very few of these people who would actually make the effort of kind of breaking those barriers and kind of having a healthy discussion and saying that this is what, if that happens, then the cross pollination between if she's written and she's done the art, it should be spoken about, but that doesn't happen.
True. Sharmila, I invite Sharmila to please unmute yourself. Alan Ramesh, please help her unmute.
You sing?
Yeah, yeah. Now yeah. Thanks so much, Yamini. It was so interesting to know about all these lesser known or unknown women artists like Bangala Devi Tampuran or Damayanti Chawla or Sita Devi, Ganga Devi. One beautiful thing I find about these women artists, they always combine art with craft
Mhm.
and they use many mystery symbols or motifs. But that is the thing they were always criticized by the male art critic.
Yeah.
Actually, that was their strength, their narrative, their weaving their personal stories with the folk stories, their
Mm,
narrative structure of art. But why they were always criticized for that, I don't understand this. And one
mm,
more thing, I think subject wise or technologically, they were always at par with their male counterparts. But it was never documented or never mentioned.
mm. So, I've also worked in the art market, the commercial space, which is both the galleries that do transactions straight up and the auction. And one of the things, when somebody wanted to buy, a little circuitous way to come to your answer, just bear with me. Uh, One of the things that most buyers would ask, especially those who are starting out new or new in that space, is saying that, is this a long-term investment? I would say,
Oh,
like, I mean, how do you want me to answer that question? How? But of course, it was my job at that time, and I would say that that's always difficult to answer. But what you need to look at it is what has the artist done so far? How long have they worked? And what are the exhibitions that they have had? Are they in museums? That's the only way you can imagine what the future of that artist is going to be. You can never tell whether he will continue to paint for the next 10 years. And the only reason they were asking is because it means that if they buy something today and the artist stops painting tomorrow, that means that there's no future market for it, right? And that is also something, one of the reasons why uh, it was always the male artists wrong, the men who kind of got in because they kind of felt that there would be consistency and nothing would kind of derail them from the path that they've chosen. Whereas for a woman, I'm putting it in a very, very blunt manner. Whereas for a woman, it would be, and which is true in anything, in corporate or not corporate or whatever. There's, oh, what if she has a child and then she stops painting? What if she then, moves to a different city?
Oh,
Then what happens to her career? These are questions that come up, and then people hesitate because the art market, like any other thing, it's an investment that they're making in the artist. And they want consistency to come. Galleries want that the artist work so that they're able to sell and say that, okay, they've done this work and, they're showing this. This is the new body of work which is there.
Right.
They want all of these things there. That's one part of the story. Now, coming back to your question, saying that why is it that, uh, you know, that they're disregarding the subjects which are there. It is kind of rooted in this. Because for the longest time, not only in India, but even in the world, uh, it was always the male vision, right? It was always how
Yeah.
man saw the world, because the patrons were men. The in between who kind of facilitated the transaction between the artist and the patron were men. And that was the only perspective that kind of came through. Also, look
Yeah.
at words that we use. Again, slight digression. It's always a masterpiece. It's always a
Yeah.
master artist. It's a
It's
master.
a history, never a her story.
I mean, that. So so that kind of it is just ingrained or embedded in what is being projected. Okay. And hence this common perception that you have, oh, this is a woman's subject or this is feminine. And these are biases that cannot be overdone overnight. But there are changes that are happening. For instance, if you look at another artist that I did include, Madhvi Parekh. Madhvi Parekh was instrumental in kind of like Sunayani Devi, where she didn't look at what was happening. She didn't look at what the Tagore brothers were doing or what their art was. She stuck to her vision and she created something that was very different. Yeah. Her brothers didn't recognize it. Her husband supported it because he was possibly in love with her and just believed in her. It was somebody else who noticed it later and spoke about it, and that was Jamini Roy. And Jamini Roy got inspired from that, and he started doing those paintings. And when he started doing the same thing, it became universal language, the Indian folk, and
Yes.
everything,
That is
right?
so unfortunate.
But that's the nature of the beast. That is why conversations like these become important. And if there are any young students here or anybody who's interested, that change needs to happen. And that will happen over a period of time. Because these biases are so deeply entrenched that we don't even realize it at times. And we kind of, you know, play into it without giving it a second thought also. And I don't blame you know, I don't blame, oh, all men do that and all. This is it's not as simple as
society. It's not
yeah.
just the men, but
It's
the whole society,
yeah.
women
I
included.
mean, me included, responsible for what we are today,
Yeah.
right? And so it takes time to kind of um, correct what has been wrong. And fortunately, I don't know, not fortunately, interestingly, it's happening in Europe. There are a lot of these discoveries that are being made, which are, the forgotten artist or
Yeah.
Hilna Amclift, who's
Yeah.
the Belgian artist who did abstract works, and now they're saying that we were taught history where we said that Kandinsky was the first one to make an abstract painting, but now it
Yeah.
turns out that she did it before him, and Kandinsky had seen her work, and that kind of story comes out. Or Rodin's assistant, who was an artist herself, Claudel, her story kind of comes out into open. Or what's her name? Picasso's young girlfriend, I'm forgetting the name, her works. So
Yeah.
these things make,
Mara.
no, not Mara. The one who was the painter. Mara was dancer.
Yeah.
Anyway, names will come. But what is happening is that it's a long process, and that's why you need women not only as artists, but you need women as patrons. Like Kiran Nadar makes that splash. I love it. Like
Yeah.
I am, come. When she enters an auction room, people get scared to bid because she's going to kind of take it.
I love that.
I love it.
Yeah.
And she's bold and brash. People say she's so bold and brash. I said, why? But you need that. If a man would have done that, would you have said it? No.
Yes.
I, whatever it is. And she calls her museum by her name, Kiran Nadar Museum of Art. That's it.
Yes.
You need people like that, right? And it's not that she's only showing women artists. She shows everybody. That's, that she doesn't, you need that. You need more women like, Kamala Devi Chattopadhyay, Pupul Jaikar,
Mm.
to come to the forefront and make these changes happen. And they were not necessarily saying that, from the women's lib agenda. They were just doing work, and it comes naturally, inherently, that you will look at certain things differently. You will be sensitive to the needs of a woman in from the rural area. Like Vipul Jaikar could think that, oh, why should a woman do back-breaking labor? Though the fact is, apologies to the men over here, that in any construction site, whether it's a road or an airport, it is the women who do the most work. The men want to sleep after
Yeah.
their lunch, and they want to stop for their the smoke or the tobacco break. But the woman who works
Yeah.
tirelessly.
Women carry the bricks and
Exactly.
men build.
But despite that, it it was Pupul Jaikar and not the other people who were surveying and trying to figure out how do you make, how do you give them, uh, they were affected by the earthquake. How do you give them? They thought of like, oh, labor, the easy thing. But she had to say, no, let the women do this. This is possible. That is what is required to be able to be sensitive, not necessarily in a confrontation or a challenge, but in a very sensible way, saying that it is required or this is what suits them the best, and that's why you need to do it. Not because I'm a woman and I believe in this theory and I need to. No, it doesn't work that way. Then it only has its life till this much and then it stops. But if it is intrinsic, then it grows, evolves. And then from there, like the first three women who were, the great artists, now the entire village does it. No, young boys do it.
Yeah.
Everybody does it. There's
Yes.
no harm in that. As long as they're doing good work, it's fine.
Yes.
Mm.
And I think most of the time, like for many decades, till the academic education started, women artists were always someone's sister or daughter or wife. That way, they were never an
This
independent
is
artist. Like,
this is again an interesting thing. We know of them because of the
yeah,
association that they've had, right?
yeah.
Mm.
I
Maybe
think Amrita Shargil was the first one, I think, who
Yes,
was,
she was a
yeah,
stand. Like,
yeah,
yeah.
sorry,
standalone artist, like independent artist.
who?
Amrita
Amrita
Shargil.
Shandil.
Um, well,
I think the train
her father was a photographer. Her uncle was
yeah,
an
No, but
art.
those names were not as known as Amrita now, for example.
Yeah. Amrita is
And
another story
that is a
altogether.
background, but
Yeah,
and
she.
many times I think universally also it has happened that the studio owner was the male artist, so their assistants or their models they created work and it was claimed by them.
Correct.
So it must have happened in India also, I think.
Oh, yes.
our time is up. I'm getting a message, ma'am. We have
Wow.
to wind up. But this was
It
not
was so
enough.
interesting, but yeah,
This was definitely not.
Oh, there's a message.
Okay. Ramesh is asking that. So, you by any reason why you did not cover Anjali Elamenan? Oh, there are so many artists like
so
Prat
many artists
Desai is
have.
there,
Yes.
Anjali is there, and you.
I didn't cover B. Prabha.
Arpita Singh is there.
Prabha.
Yeah, so
Arpita
many
Singh
are
I
there.
didn't
Yeah.
cover.
So the
Amrita
Ramesh,
Shetty
what
had a
I'm
super
saying is, I'm
picture.
telling this to everybody, and especially Yamini and Sharmila too, that we need to have a series. We have to cover this, and
Yeah,
Yamini,
I would
the
definitely
book
like
on
to
this
see that.
topic will be very interesting, and that could be just your great contribution.
No, no.
Yeah.
And
Women in
Ramesh,
Fine Arts, the
uh,
India story,
yeah.
along not just with their what they have done, but their struggles and
Mm.
all such things which are.
Yeah, I mean, I would like to know about the women artists all over the world from you. Like
Yes, yes,
this.
that too.
Yeah,
So
Yeah.
I think
It
on
will
this
be so
note,
interesting.
I'm sorry for the audience who did not have any opportunity to talk and interact.
Yeah,
I
that,
think very soon we
sorry.
will arrange for a session. Okay. Uh,
Yes,
I
yes,
mean, if you
definitely.
all want to, please indicate it on the WhatsApp group. Please join the WhatsApp group.
I
Ramesh
just
has
wanted to say thank you so much, Yamini ma'am. It was amazing. I'm a fine art student myself, and
okay.
this has really been so interesting. And yeah, just thank you so much.
by
And
end of the century, your name should come up in the history book.
yes,
Hi, my favorite friend Arundhati is also here. I'm sure she would have contributed
Oh,
so much to this
Arundhati. Hi.
discussion.
Yeah,
Um,
I, I so much wanted to, but something has gone wrong. May I make just one point?
Yes, please.
Actually, when you talk of the art promoters and the women who have contributed to women's development of art, I think one name that has to come up is Sundari Sridharani, because it's thanks to her and the Triveni Art Gallery that people like B. Prabha, this Vasundhara Bruta, I mean, a whole crop of 80s and 90s
yes, yes.
writers. They were given an opportunity and they were given the much needed exposure. I don't think that women in Delhi, especially like Anjali Ella Menon, of course, was one of Kala's finds. But women in Delhi, especially the artist community, the picture is pretty hopeful. I think the male hegemony and everything is has let up considerably.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's
Uh,
happening
See,
everywhere, I think.
from
yeah,
city to
and what
city
we
it
need
differs, and
perhaps is, Kiran Nadar, of course, is privileged, and it's wonderful to have a museum that headed by her, with her
uh,
kind of attitude,
yes,
bold and beautiful
some people,
attitude.
sorry to disturb you. Some people are asking for WhatsApp group. The link is shared in the chat box. Please look for it and join the book. We don't have to really, get get you in. You just can join. There's no problem.
Yeah.
Ramesh has just shared the link. Ramesh, can you once again paste it, please? Yeah, and please join, and let's continue with the discussion on the WhatsApp group. Okay, very good. Jyoti has joined, and well, so many others would. We should continue this discussion. This is very interesting. Thank you, Yamini. Thank you so much. I mean, this is not sufficient. I'm hungry. I'm hungry.
It's good.
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for all of you.
Tomorrow, our lecture for this Women's Week will start at 7 o'clock, and Dr. Preeti Shirodkar will be talking about women in literature. Again, Indian story, but she might include some other names also. But
नाही तुला सांगायचं होतं की तू ऑन व्हॉट बेसिस यू सिलेक्ट टुडेज आर्टिस्ट 20 मध्ये आहे तिकडं ना कारण त्या म्हटलं तसं तर 20th
what is
सेंचुरीच्याच
this?
गीत आहे
Oh, okay. I think we should
Cross
end.
connection.
There's some distance.
Someone's mic is off.
Cross connection. Yeah. Okay.
लास्ट 25 years
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.
पुष्कळ यंग ब्लड आले